Hello, this is Jack Jackson. In this video, we're going to give a brief geographic location and timeline of classical Greek mathematicians in what I'm going to call the millennium of Greek mathematics, or the Greek millennium. This goes from about 600 BCE to about 400 CE, or from Thales to Hypatia. This next slide is taken from a portion of the very large timeline of mathematics that my students and I put together for our hallway in the mathematics science building at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith, where I work. And here is a portion of this where we have various prominent mathematicians listed with their timelines here. And so the little bars from the picture here to the left all the way to the right indicates their lifespan, and you can see the scale on the top. So we start around 600 BCE. Thales and Alexander were a little before that, and then lived through that time period, and then on after that. And you can follow this along here. This particular slide ends at basically the end or the beginning of the Common Era, or the end of the before Common Era. So this would be the 1st century BCE, 2nd century, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and just a little piece of the 7th century BCE. There are many mathematicians on here that we've talked about, and and several more that we have not talked about. Almost all of these are considered Greek mathematicians. And one word about this: almost every date that you're going to see me giving you here, first of all, they were taken from the Mac Tutor History of Mathematics, and we're very much indebted to the creators of that site for having that great resource. There are biographies of every one of these folks there. And but almost all these dates are approximate, because we really don't know for most of these exactly when they were born or died. In some cases, we know one or the other. In more cases, we know their death date than their birth date, but most of these are at least approximations. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind, that this is sort of a best guess, but these dates are kind of put together by looking at when one person talked about another person, then that other, let us know which one came first, which one came second. Sometimes they'll reference historical events and so forth. But this is sort of our best guess. So it starts here with Thales, right here. Then his student Anaximander, Pythagoras is here, and then some other ones here. Some of these we talked about, some we didn't. We talked about Zeno, who's up here. Let's see, who are some of the others that we talked about? We talked about Eudoxus. We talked about Thaddeus. We talked about Aristotle here. We talked about Archimedes for sure, one of the best mathematicians of all times, maybe the best. Eratosthenes was down here. Apollonius, Eratosthenes, and Archimedes were kind of contemporaries. Their lives overlapped there. Possibly Archimedes and Euclid's lives may have overlapped there, probably. So this is kind of the foundations here of Greek mathematics, up until really going strong here with Euclid and Archimedes and Apollonius. Okay, and then we start working at some later ones here, different ones. There is a Chinese mathematician there mixed in with the Greeks there. Vitruvius is a Roman mathematician there, one of the few that we have listed there. And his mathematics was a little more practical and not as advanced as some of the Greek things. We'll talk a little bit more about Chinese mathematics maybe in next week's material. And then we get to the beginning of the Common Era. The Greek culture had kind of spread throughout all of this time here, through the eastern part of the Mediterranean basin. And then in this period back here, the latter part of these centuries here, Rome became the dominant influence, particularly had become an empire in this first century BCE. And here we go on to some important mathematicians for later. Heron of Alexandria is an important one that was in Alexandria, and several different ones here. There is Diophantus. We've talked about him. Here are a couple non-Greeks in here. There's one that is a Chinese mathematician there, and an Indian one there, another Chinese one over here and up here. But some other Greek mathematicians there, not as many of them that we've listed here. There's another Chinese one up there. The rest of these would have been Greek. Diophantus that we talked about in a previous video, and we briefly talked about Pappus there. And here's Theon of Alexandria and his daughter Hypatia, the first woman that we have listed on the timeline. And her death here in 414, I think it was, 415, marks kind of the end of the Greek period, the Greek millennium of mathematics. Now, this is a map. I've shown this at least once before in earlier video, but this one kind of shows us where a lot of the mathematicians were. So if you look at this insert right in here, the little bit of Asia Minor and the Greek peninsula here, it's blown up here. So in Athens, you had Plato, Thales. We have different ones that you can see here. Pythagoras started over here and ended up in Croton. In Miletus, you had Thales and Anaximander. Hippocrates down here. Eudoxus was down in this part on some of these islands around in this area here, kind of around the Aegean Sea. Proclus is up here in Constantinople, previously known as Byzantium, now known as Istanbul, and different ones. Aristophanes started here, but he became the librarian at Alexandria. Apollonius was right here. But then you look at how many different ones, the important ones were here. Diophantus, Euclid, Heron, Hypatia, Menelaus, Pappus, Ptolemy. We've talked about most, if not all of those, at least a little bit. And Eratosthenes there as well. And even Archimedes went there for a while before he kind of settled at Syracuse. So you see, this was the ancient Greek world, eventually part of the ancient Roman world, and you can see kind of where these folks were. So once again, we have kind of looking here at the timeline for this millennium, a lot of the important mathematicians and where they were. And so that's going to conclude my little lectures on Greek mathematics. 2 weeks of lectures on that, and that's going to kind of conclude my first unit in history of mathematics over early mathematics. Let's see, what else did we do? We did Mesopotamian, Egyptian mathematics. We talked about ancient numeration systems, a little bit about Indian mathematics there, although we'll come back and talk a little bit about more of them next week. And then a lot of that was talking about Greek mathematics.